Tutankhamun's death and burial. Mysterious reasons. Funerary equipment. 1. Canopics, mummy trappings, pectorals. If the king had been ailing for some time, as Hawass and his team conclude, arrangements should have been somewhat advanced for his burial when he passed away. That few if any provisions for Tutankhamun's afterlife preceded the king's death. Be that as it may, a flurry of activity will have resulted when news of the king's demise became known at the royal residence in Memphis. There was plenty to do while the body was being readied for burial. His personal effects had to be packed, everything he might have used in this life and require for the next, from clothing and jewelry, furniture and linens, to his hunting gear and chariots, etc. And lists drawn up for a token supply of food and drink to satisfy his hunger and thirst in perpetuity. More importantly, the one-chambered tomb in the Valley of the Kings selected for the burial had to be enlarged. A crypt was cut at the north end of the single room to a depth of nearly a meter below the original FL or level to serve as the burial chamber. From its east end opened a smaller room that Carter would call the treasury. Near the southeast corner of what had become KV-62's antechamber, a third room was added, its entrance at FL or level. Tentative plans for decorating the tomb needed to be made as well, and a schedule drawn up for stocking it. Simultaneously, the equipment indispensable for a pharaoh's burial and survival in the hereafter had to be assembled. The inscriptions on many items that had been made for his predecessors, the ruling queen in particular, could be altered to name Tutankhamun, but others had to be commissioned for him. By contrast, the inlaid gold bands, so called trappings, that were placed like bindings around the mummy, and the little gold coffins, 4 in number, for the organs removed from the body during mummification, preserve unequivocal traces of the touch with her special epithet beneficial for her husband. The gilded figures of the tutelary goddesses Isis, Nephthys, Selkit, and Neith, all subsumed under whose outstretched arms protected the canopic shrine around the chest of Egyptian alabaster, were designed in conformity with the Amarna canon. Gay Robbins has also remarked that the pleated garments they wear are inappropriate attire for goddesses. Like the crimped sash knotted under their breasts, such clothing belonged to a queen's wardrobe, familiar from representations of Nefertiti. Possibly these features are holdovers from Akhenaten's reign. Alternatively, the figures were made after Akhenaten's death, but before Tutankhamun came to the throne to depict a queen, and were only subsequently adapted for traditional use by affixing the goddesses' emblems to their heads. The position of 2 of the goddesses' figures in relation to the shrine provides an example of the carelessness of those who carried out the burial. The statue of Selkit was attached to the sled where Nephthys should have stood, and vice versa. Also noteworthy is the damage to the lids of the 4 compartments of the canopic chest. Both vulture and urius at the forehead on one lid were broken off, and the vulture's beaks were chipped, while the king's nose of the last had been so inexpertly mended as to disfigure the face. Aidan Dodson terms the claim that the lids do not look like Tutankhamun subjective and dismisses it. Each lid depicts the king wearing the royal nemes, head cloth with a vulture's head and a urius at his brow. The pairing, which is found both earlier in the design of the stoppers of Amenhotep II's canopic chest, and later for those of King Hormab, conforms to specifically funerary imagery. As in the design of all 3 coffins from KV-62, the vulture and cobra, fronting the king's headdress, do not represent the goddesses of Upper and Lower Egypt, as repeatedly incorrectly described. Rather, they embody Isis and Nephthys, respectively, who join forces to protect their brother Osiris, with whom the king in death was assimilated. The sisters appear on many items of funerary equipment from the tomb, as does the sky goddess Nut, depicted as a winged woman. Texts frequently express the wish that she protect the deceased king with her embrace. She is featured in the design of a pectoral, where traces of the original text show that it, too, once belonged to the ruling queen. The jewel was found in the portable shrine surmounted by a recumbent figure of the jackal god Anubis, which stood in the doorway between the burial chamber and the treasury. Another of the 7 pectorals found with it had also been appropriated from a predecessor of Tutankhamun, possibly Akhenaten.